So today on this introductory course to Final Cut Pro version 10.3, we're just going to look at adding text to our videos. So over here, we have a project that we were working on in the previous video. So I'm just going to show you how to begin adding text to the video. So your text are up here. We have our folders, our libraries, and it's the one, not this symbol here, the one next to it with the T. So if you click here, that's our titles and our generators. Generators are our backgrounds, our titles are our text. So we're going to begin looking at how we can add these onto our videos. First of all, any of the ones here that have a black background that aren't black, it's essentially nothingness. It's like our gap media. So they can be placed on the line above the video and you'll see the images beneath them. So if I take this basic 3D one, for example, drag it and place it on the line above my video, you'll see that the words appear above the image. If you were to place them on the timeline alongside the video, which you absolutely can do. Actually, sorry, I've got my wrong, back to letter A again. You'll see that it's just appears to be on a pure black background, but that's only because there's nothing underneath it. Any of these titles which have sort of coloured background of some kind, there's a silver one there, there's a white one here. These ones have a background. So if I click that and drag it and place it above the clip, you can't see the clip that exists underneath, it cuts to it. But these can be disabled. So if you click on the clip, any of the clips really that have a background enabled in them, when you go up to your inspector, it's in the T function. This one here has the option of show backgrounds. If you deselect it, then you've got the text appearing over the video, the same as the other ones. If I pick another example, let's take this one here and pop it here. The same function is still here, but there's a number of additional options. Each text portion is going to have, depending on how much animation has been applied, depending on what sort of features are enabled for that particular portion of text, it's going to have different functions. So it's not a one-size-fits-all for these particular functions. So let's just delete that there for a moment. So now we want to place our text onto our timeline, and obviously we want it to pick something that's going to work. So we want a nice kind of title for this one. So maybe I'll just pick this one that's got a nice kind of gentle blur in here to begin with. So it's going to gently blur into the video with our sound. Now I'm going to temporarily disable this audio. You can temporarily disable any clip or whether it's visual or audio, by using the letter V on your keyboard. The letter V just temporarily disables this. It's like it's not there. If you were to do an export, it wouldn't export like it's like it completely doesn't exist. And you can re-enable that by hitting V again. I'm just going to disable that so you can focus on the visuals without playing the sound each time. So the first thing to note then is that we want the title. It can be placed anywhere you want. A lot of the adjustments you can make is actually on the screen itself. So now I've got my text, I'm going to just close this portion so you can see it a bit more clearly. So you can actually click on the text itself on the screen, and you can use that to drag it wherever you want it to be. So I don't want it to be in the middle of his face. As I can drag as well, you can kind of see these guidelines start to appear. When I'm in here, it's kind of where it wants to be. When I align horizontally, it tells me where I am. This is aligned with the center of the word. This is horizontally aligned with the base of the word. This is horizontally aligned with the top of the word. Similarly, when I get to the vertical axis, I am aligned vertically here with the end of the word, with the beginning of the word, base, side, or with the center. And that's full center right there. So I'm going to decide I want it to be maybe, I'll keep it kind of down here for the moment. It's our lower thirds, but I want it to be so still it's going to be our title option. So I need to give this, I need to be able to type in. So you double click on the word itself and you can actually type straight onto the screen. So I'm just going to say this particular, the piece of music is called Iron, so I'm going to call it Iron. And it's a solo performance, so I'm going to call it Iron Solo. And now I've typed in the word, and like I said, I want to place it somewhere slightly different because I want it to be exactly there. So let's just do a little play of that. It just blurs in there. It might even come in slightly soon, so let me just have a little moment of black first of all. Pull it over a little bit. There we go. And I might want it to fade out before the next clip, so let's drag that in a little bit and see how that goes. So it's going to blur out there. maybe even slightly later. Okay, so we can type in the text directly onto our screen. So now that we've got text typed on our screen, up here we have a lot of different options that are largely very similar to Word. So you can either highlight it here on the screen, select in here, or you can select it up here now that we have text that is written and printed. So in the first option here, this is titled, this has got different types of options. This is more like how it's animated. So your build in and your build out, those are related to whether or not it animates in and out, and it's very, very dependent on the function of that particular piece of text. And different ones have different ones. Some spin around around the screen, some kind of fade in, some kind of move to the side. So they all have different functions. The build in is if whether or not it kind of cuts straight in or whether it uses its inbuilt animation. So if I take out the build in, you see it just pops onto the screen. If I bring the build in back in, then it blurs softly into the screen. And that's the same with the exit. So it can either cut out or it can build out. If I want it to cut out, maybe say in time with this part, I might take the build out and then it's just going to cut as the clip cuts. Yeah, so that's kind of how your Command Z to undo everything. That's sort of how those work. And you have some font adjustments and size and things here, but we're going to work with that in more detail actually in the paragraph section. You can also do things like change the colour, things like these are all very different depending on the font, so you do just kind of have to have a little bit of a play with them. By character, by word or line, so that's whether the whole line fades in or whether each letter fades in one by one, whether it fades in forwards, sideways, backwards. They all have slightly different effects. So let's just move over to the paragraph. So from here, you can go down to sort of some of the basic adjustments. Now all of these menus here, so you've got the option, like again, unless you're hovering over something over the screen, sometimes you don't see it. So it's like there's nothing there until you bring the mouse up to it and you have the option to hide. So if I hide that, and hide that, you can see you've got all these different options here within our text, and all of these, every single one of them, has a sub-menu that you can utilise in some capacity. So we'll hide them for the moment, but we're going to go into this. So I want my basic ones to be shown, and by default the basic ones are shown because they're the ones that are used the most. So iron solo is highlighted. So here, this is where you can adjust the font. So if you click here, you get a nice drop down menu full of fonts depending on what you happen to have in your Word in your computer. Now I don't know if you can see this as well, but on the screen at the moment, the last couple of letters are slightly blurred. Now that's in relation to where my playhead is. And this can be quite important, especially if you have titles which have different words placed at different points in the screen. So if I was to make my font adjustment here, you might find that everything looks blurry. So you need to make sure whatever you're adjusting, whether that's the font, whether that's what's written, it has to be adjusted at the point where it becomes clear and where it becomes readable and important there. So I want it to be here. Let's go back to that so we're not getting that blur at the end of that letter. So you've got some quite dramatic ones, depending on the font. So if you have some nice kind of like simple ones, things like, you know, the ones we all know, things like Helvetica, these will have a lot of options in the sub-menu, which is regular. So you've got things like light, oblique, various options here. Some of the more ornate options, things like these ones, are only going to have regular because they're designed to be quite decorative, so there's not going to be too many options for them. So let's stick with that one, why not? It's quite an interesting one. So now we've got the font, and we've got whether this one is regular. You can then adjust the size. You can do that just by doing this one here, or actually by typing in a particular number. You can also use a scroller up and down within the numbers themselves. We want to be quite specific. So I don't know why, let's go for about 110. So it's kind of bold enough. But now we've increased the size, we need to adjust where it is again because the location is sort of shifted a little bit. Now we have that, you've got also your alignment. So the alignment actually is in relation to this dot here. So you can see here it's centered around this dot that we have when we start making our adjustments. So if we go here, over to our left align, it's left aligned to this. Here centered, and here right aligned. So you can make your kind of adjustments in relation to that. So if I had that right aligned, actually I think if I adjust the size, yeah, it stays where it is. So if you need to make your alignment particular to this point, you could choose your point where the words are going to come in, and then it's not going to, like that can just in one individual word. So unhighlighted this portion, so let's highlight the whole thing again. So now it's going to make that adjustment but keep the placement. Vertical adjustment here, I don't worry too much about those ones. It's kind of, it depends if it's more if there's more writing involved in each portion. The line spacing, now that's if you have these words on different lines. So scroll back up again. The computer's just a moment to freeze. So if I take this here, I'll do it this here, I'll make it a little bit easier. Drag this up and hit return. So now I've got two lines. If I highlight these, my line spacing is how far apart the lines are. And that can be relevant depending on if you have like paragraphs, because you can paste whole loads of kind of titles and credits and all kinds of things, and sometimes when you change the size of those as well, the alignment between the words starts to pull apart or get closer together, so that can become quite important. So I'm going to undo all of that because I just want to keep it on a single line. The tracking is how far apart the letters are. So if I pull the tracking, the letters get further apart. So that's quite nice where his body aligns with the centre of the words. Let's keep that. Wow, for a new creative twist. The baseline is where, so we have again our kind of little alignment point here, and this is the baseline. This just determines where the words are in relation to that. So as you're moving it around, it's just another sort of guideline that you have there. Now this is quite a fun one, all caps. Possibly won't appear in this font, so let me just change back to my Helvetica briefly. So I've got everything in lowercase. This option here for all capitals will turn everything into capital letters. So if I tick that, everything is now in capitals. What you can see is that the ones that were previously capitals are now slightly bigger capitals. So you've got a slightly different look. So it doesn't, so it still kind of keeps that capital lowercase relationship, but it's placed everything now in capitals. So it's a nice kind of quick option sometimes if you just want to see what something looks like in capitals or not. And it can be a nice, nice decorative option. So I'm going to put that back to the previous font because that was quite fun the way it was. And down here, yeah, are all caps size. So that's actually, I think, where you can make that adjustment there. So we have all caps ticked, and then we haven't. We kind of adjust how much that is in relation to those. So you can actually adjust how small or how large. I think that one, yeah, 100% puts them all back into relationship to where they were. But that nice, it's a nice little feature there. You can have that relationship. Let's skip 3D text for the moment because that's a little bit more complex one. It's very similar to face, but it gives face different dimensions. So the face is just the kind of look, so it's the colour, it's also the texture, I think also the opacity of the letters themselves. So if I click on show, let's get a little submenu here. Fill with, it's in colour, gradient, texture. So let's just stick with colour for the moment, and we want a particular colour. So right now they're white. Of course, we always have a drop down menu, so you can really choose whatever colour you really want. So let's have a look at these blues, see if we can match it up with this blue that we have here. So you can pick a particular colour like this. Alternatively, you can double click on the colour box itself, which will open up another submenu. This one's particularly handy for its dropper function. If I click on the dropper, this allows me to choose particular pixels that are present on the screen. So I'm actually going to choose a pixel from here that I like. Let's pick one of these. Might be a tiny bit dark, but it's quite nice. And once you've picked that, you can make an adjustment to it. So maybe make it a little brighter. Just a little. I think that's a tiny bit too purple, so let's choose another one. Let's maybe say, maybe it just is purple. Let's go with that one. Make it a little brighter. Yeah, that's quite a purple. So now you've got this colour has now appeared. Maybe drop more on the blue side. And I'm going to drag this colour, click it, drag it, pull it with me and drop it on top of this box. And now my text is matched up with the colour that I've selected in the picker. It can be really useful for doing things like matching up your text with maybe logos you've been given or things like that you know you want it to match, or to match the colour of a scene, you want it maybe to match a costume that someone's wearing or the colour of someone's hair, those types of things. The opacity is how see-through that is. Now this is on black, so you won't see that too well, but if you bring down the opacity, it tends to soften things a little bit. It also might darken them a little bit, because this particular font, there's a lot of black in the background, so if you kind of bring in, this also has a glow attached to it though, so that's why this yellow starts to appear. It's because there's a glow function that's built into part of the text. So you might bring it down just a tiny bit just to soften it. And let's just play and see how that's starting to look. What's between the words? There we go. So we're starting to kind of create. This particular font has a bit of an outline as part of its glow. So that's just sort of part of the animation. It's kind of hard to get rid of that. If, however, the face was changed to 3D, there's a whole load of different functions start to come into play. The face almost becomes a little bit kind of redundant, it sort of disappears. And the face is now replaced with facets and dimensions. So you've got all these options have now started to appear. So your lighting, because it's 3D, you can decide like where the light is in relation. So you might match it up. So like, for example, standard, medium, left, above. The light is coming from Jason and a diagonal left. So you might match up the lighting on the writing to where the lighting is on the text, for example. You can also change the material. So we got here grunge. So it might turn into some sort of different kind of grungy material. You might match it up even to things like the wood that you have. It's going to change it totally. So that might match up now with the wood that you have on the handle, as opposed to the blue sort of tape on the rope. So you have all these different options. With 3D it becomes much, much more complicated and also more creative and more interesting. So you can have a play with those. If you self-shadows, intensity, you can kind of soften them a little bit. Again, grain depth, placement. You can add things like scratches and different things to these options. Add layer, distress, scratches, stains, dirt. So you can make it kind of slightly scratchy, so it's not kind of like a solid wood. Distress, scratches, 100%. So you have all of these. Let's full screen that, see how that works. Now, if you space bar it, you can see sort of the full dimensions. It looks a little funny with this particular font, but we'll work with that anyway. Double click this to bring that back in and reactivate all of these options. I don't know why that went away for a moment. So there's a lot of options available to you for your text. And again, things like your opacity, you can kind of bring that down if you want it to be slightly more see-through. Things like your transform, your crop, these are all things we're going to go into in a later video. They can all be altered as well. And your information still is just your kind of metadata, the information, the length, the duration, and all that kind of stuff, and the rules. So that's your sort of basic text. Now with most of these, again, there's loads and loads of different options, and you do just sort of have to have a play with it. Some of the more built-in animated ones are going to take a bit more time. What's most important, I think, about the animated ones is that wherever you're making an adjustment, let's find one. This is a good one. Let me bring this one in. So this one, you can see it has a variety. The words appear in different places, and that becomes important. I'll drag that in so I can really get that. That becomes important because if you want to make an adjustment to the word, you have to make sure that your playhead is at the point where those words start to appear, otherwise you're not going to be able to make any adjustments to them. So I can only type in that information when it's here. So I have to make sure that I double click there so I can actually see where that adjustment is happening. And also, for example, if you want to choose where that word happens to appear on the screen, like maybe I don't want it kind of quite in the space or something like that, you have to find the point where it's at the moment where you, sorry, just a little bit slower. You have to make sure that it's at the peak point. Undo. Double click. So you're going to see it come into play. Pull this down. Let's just play that briefly. So my computer's been a tiny bit slow.
I feel like I wouldn't add on much to it, or probably just...
Yeah, so if you want to make an adjustment to the text, to type them or to move them, you have to make sure that the playhead is adjusted to that point. So yes, you've got things like, also within your titles, actually, just one more small thing up here. Clicking down, you've got a few subheadings, so you don't have to scroll through them all. If you know you want credits, you know you want kind of lower thirds, those types of things. The lower thirds are good for descriptors, they're good for interviews, they're good for something which has, you're interviewing different people, or has different chapters, different parts to a piece, you can use those for that. Credits, you have your standard scrolling credits, but to be honest, you can use any of your sort of standard build in, build out with credits. You might just have a whole page that fades in and out of the screen kind of bit by bit. A lot of these bumpers, openers, they're kind of good for sort of bold openings to things. And then we've got our 3D cinematic. You can start to have a play with those. Again, these titles and generators, they don't have to have the backgrounds there. They can be quite fun, but any of these that have a background, you can disable the background usually up here, so you can still function without that if need be. So that is our text for today. So thank you very much for watching.